Perfect. So, hello to everyone who obviously comes and joins us, whether you're watching this now or later on. A quick little thing from me. I'm Jess. I'm part of Bikes and Laces. We're a running and cycling YouTube channel. We are also triathlon relay racers and both live quite busy lives. So, yeah, I'm super excited to have a chat to you and just generally do a bit of an Instagram live stream with you. I've really enjoyed watching all your live videos the last week or so. So, yeah, they've been super fun to watch. Do you want to say a bit about yourself, just in case anyone from my side jumps on who doesn't know you?
Okay, so thanks, Jess, for inviting me along. My name's Matt Phillips, and I'm the host of Runchatlive Podcast and sports therapist, looking predominantly after runners and triathletes. Yeah, recently, because of the social distancing and the whole COVID-19, and I've been putting out a series of advice for new runners, basically because I've been going out every day running, and I thought afterwards, just to help people either get back into running if they're bored and stressed out of being at home, or maybe introduce running into their lives, because I think through personal experience and knowing other runners, it can really help clear your head and hopefully get people through these difficult times. So I think that's where we hooked up and met each other.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I came across your live streams, and you know, it's just good to watch. It's nice to see the information and get a little bit more insight into things, which is why obviously I thought I would have a chat to you today about strength and conditioning. So yeah, I've got a couple of questions, but obviously in the comments, if any of you have any questions, do drop them in, and we'll see if we can get them answered. So yeah, okay, let's start with the first question. Okay. So you talked about how you kind of aim towards people who are just getting into running. So the first question is, for someone who's just starting running, would you recommend strength and conditioning for them?
It's probably not. Well, it depends very much on the person. You're going to get a bit sick and tired of me, anyone listening, and you, Jess, definitely, because most of my answers will begin with "it depends." But that's a really important factor to take into account for athletes, so I'm sure you're aware. So it does depend. For runners who are less confident, the important thing for me is just give them the confidence to get out the door and embrace running and find a walk, run maybe scenario which just suits their body, and just start enjoying it, relaxing. I don't want to fill them with all sorts of worries of I need to do this as well and buy this and do that. Running a strength work, if a person is able to walk and get out the door and functionally able to get up and get down and stuff, in theory, they should be able to build up their resilience just by doing walk running. Strength work, as we'll probably discuss later on, can help with performance. There's not a lot of research showing it avoids injury, so I don't want to make this runner believe that unless they do strength work, they're going to get injured, because it's not really that accurate. So probably for most people, no. I'm just going to get them to get out the door, embrace it, not run too fast, and just enjoy it, basically.
Amazing. So obviously, kind of as a new runner, then maybe something you wouldn't start to suggest. So what point do you think would be ideal for runners to start taking on strength and conditioning? And do you think there are any major benefits they could get from it?
I think it depends. This is the exciting thing. This is why I always like, I've been saying, I've got a few runners I'm working with now just for free, because I've said from the beginning, look, if you're going to do this and get out the door and you've got some questions, then email me, because a lot of it depends on the individual. And we do like online consultations and face-to-face talk about experiences. But if a runner starts wanting to do some strength training, if they're into it and they've got access at home and the bug is already there and it's not going to make them too stressed out, then there's clear evidence that strength training can help your performance. There's a lot of research which will show, because basically running is hopping from one leg to the other. So in order to hop and be able to go further through the air, it helps if you're strong. So ultimately, this is why endurance runners or elite runners will be doing a lot of plyometric stuff and velocity stuff and skipping. We don't want to put a new runner straight into skipping and kind of explosive stuff. We want to build up their foundational strength first of all. So if a runner is keen to do a little bit and they enjoy it and they haven't got any other problems going on, cardiovascularly and stuff, then yeah, I get them to do some basic strength exercises, which they probably know and they've probably done before, because every time you stand up and sit down, you're doing a squat. So we'll just do some of those, maybe kind of holding a little bit of a weight, and maybe introduce the lunge. Just simple things, picking something up off the floor and standing up with a weight. So sometimes it's just everyday movements, but with a little bit of extra resistance, just to get that adaptation we're looking for.
Amazing. Okay. So that kind of ties in nicely to one of the questions that Chris actually posed to me. He wanted to know, how important is strength and conditioning for runners, but also maybe for other athletes as well, cyclists in particular, I think he was maybe aiming at, but I remember you saying in one of your live streams, you're not really much of a cyclist as much of a runner. So how important would you say it is?
It depends what your goals. Sorry, you're going to get so sick of this.
That's all right.
It depends what your goals are. I mean, it is research, like I say, shows that strength training can improve performance. There's some good research for both running and for runners and cyclists. Particularly with the cyclists, but also with running, it's the type of strength training is quite interesting, because a lot of endurance runners and cyclists feel, well, I'm doing this for hours, so I should be lifting loads of lightweight for a long time, doing kind of 50, 60 reps to mimic my actual chosen sport. But the research is quite clear in the sense that it shows that you need low reps, high weight. You need to be doing kind of in the range of maybe, some of it goes as low as 5, 6 repetitions with a heavy weight to cause near enough fatigue at the end. So that's something that a lot of runners and cyclists don't quite latch onto straight away, because most runners and cyclists don't like the idea of being a muscle Mary in the gym, flexing their biceps and wearing kind of little skimpy vests. But those guys, that's the sort of weights which endurance athletes and runners and cyclists need to be getting into, that kind of mentality of that spit on your hands, lift up a weight and get back by 5 reps. It's that's going to improve your body's capacity to produce the necessary output when you're cycling. Particularly cycling needs to be heavy, heavy weights. It's all relative, heavy in the sense that you can't do more than definitely 8 or 9. You need to, this is where body weight exercises sometimes, particularly on somebody who's already wrong, aren't going to make that much of a difference depending on the exercise. If you just get into the idea of doing 3 sets of 10, which is your typical kind of old school personal training thing, if you stop at 10 just because you've hit 10, when really you could do 15, 16, 17, you're not giving your body a reason to get stronger. You're not pushing it enough. So the main emphasis that these studies show is you do need to use a heavy enough resistance, whether it's a band or a weight, to actually not be able to do any more. And that's the reason you stop, because you can't do any more. You push your body to that boundary, and that's what stimulates the adaptation and you getting stronger.
Amazing. Okay. Have you got, so what would be your top 3 strength and conditioning go-to moves? And
for runners and cyclists, it might vary a little bit. I mean, my bias is towards runners, and I like encouraging runners to realise that it's the back of the legs, particularly the hamstrings for distance runners, which are taking a lot of the load. But also it's the calves, which produce up to 50% of the that springing effect in running. And this is where the weight comes into it, because a lot of runners who don't want to go to the gym, they'll go home and they'll see their stairs and they'll start doing some up and downs on the edge. But most healthy runners could probably do 20, 30 repetitions, particularly on both feet, going up and down over an edge. And the research shows that you need to be doing kind of 6, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 repetitions. So you are going to need some kind of weight and resistance. This can be anything. This could be something easy as a kid on your back, as long as it's done safely. It could be you with a bag full of bricks on your back. I've seen runners in the garden just using big barrels of water or sand. So as long as it's heavy, then that's great. But runners and cyclists do need to be making sure they are hitting that fatigue, using enough resistance. For cyclists, we move slightly more into the front. It's more quad dominant. You look at a cyclist, you can see they're all quads. So that's where your squats and your lunges are going to be very important. But again, with a lot of weight, you're mimicking that power as you're driving down into that pedal. You're not going to do that just with your body weight, unless you're a particularly big person.
Amazing. Okay, so let's talk about frequency of strength and conditioning. At the minute, my coach has set me, I've got like 2 sessions of strength and conditioning throughout the week, tied in with running and everything else I do. Do you reckon there is an ideal number of sessions that you would do strength and conditioning, or would you do it maybe once a week, less, more? Where do you sit on frequency?
The research is pretty cool. it points to the fact that you can actually get your adaptation with maybe a couple of times a week, and also they don't need to be that long. One of the problems that typically coaches and therapists will have with runners and cyclists is they don't really want to do their strength training. They're not all that committed. Some are, but so often therapists and coaches will give runners and cyclists too many exercises, and they expect them to do this routine, which could take them an hour and a half, and then say it 3 times a week. It's not going to happen. It needs to fit into the runner or the cyclist's lives. So the research is quite favorable in this, in that you can probably get by with just a couple of 20-minute sessions twice a week with simple exercises. You can superset them, so you could be working, for example, your quads, and then do your hamstrings straight away, maybe go to the calves, and then go back to the quads again and repeat it, a little circuit. Which is great news, because a lot of, like I say, a lot of endurance athletes, they don't want to spend too much time doing weight training. They want to get out. They want to embrace the outside on their bike or running. So you don't have to do much, and that's a good thing.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm just going to say hello to a couple of people who have joined us. We've got Marcus, which I think is one from your side. I know Chris, my other half, jumped in. Whether he's still here or not, I don't know, because he is working. But yeah, so if you do have any questions, pop them below in the comments. I've got one more question for you, and it's actually related to skipping. So you mentioned it earlier, and I read quite an interesting article on how skipping can be helpful for tendon rehab, which is something I'm working towards at the moment with my ankle. So where do you sit on the lines of skipping as rehab for tendons or strength and conditioning as part of a daily workout? I think it's suggested 5 to 10 minutes every day for tendon rehab. Where do you kind of sit on that?
So skipping is a plyometric exercise. It's very demanding because you're kind of obviously jumping up in the air and then coming down. So it's a nice closing exercise, maybe as you're getting back into running. So I always see rehab or strength training as like a ladder with different rungs. And if you imagine lying on the floor and doing a very easy exercise, if you just got over an operation or you're very weak for whatever reason, that would be at the bottom rung. And then you're working your way up, gradually increasing the stress on the tissues and in your body. Skipping would be kind of more towards the end range rehab or end range strength training. It can be an exercise which is given to runners a little bit too early. It has been shown that you do need to have a nice foundational strength before you go into plyometrics of any form. So we are quite quick to make sure, I mean, it's great, let the runner, I never like to discourage people away from exercises, because one, it might make them do it even more because no one likes being told what to do. And two, it's kind of like, it makes them fear that exercise. So yeah, essentially it would be great if all runners do incorporate some skipping into their strength training, but it needs to be put in at the right stage depending on them, whether they're coming back from injury. How long and how for? Again, it depends on the person. You don't want to overdo it. If you're a runner, the best way to get strong is to run. So anything else you do is supplemental. So you don't want to take time away from your running. But yeah, it's a good plyometric exercise. It's good for coordination, neuromuscular communication. And it's fun as well, which is another thing which is really interesting, which my next guest on Runchatlive, this isn't a plug, but it kind of ties in with it. But TODD HARGROVE is a fantastic writer from Seattle, and he's written a couple of books, Better Movement, and his latest one, Playing with Movement, he's going to be talking about. But he reminds us that one of the things which we've lost a little bit in exercise, we treat it a bit like school, is we take the fun element out of it. And when you look at the research, your body changes when it's in fun, when you've got interesting goals. And he takes it a lot back. He's from Feldenkrais background, so it's all about how kids develop. And kids don't get stronger by doing exercises in 3 sets of 10. Kids get stronger by playing in a playground, by chasing someone, by thinking there's a little bit of a prize at the end. Talking to kids, might get one walking in now. No, little toddlers, but I'd have to threaten them with death if they interrupt us. But yeah, so playing is a really important part, which a lot of therapists have forgotten about and forget to introduce, and coaches to runners. And skipping's a great game. You know, you've got that goal, you can set yourself little targets, you can move forwards and backwards and sideways and do it opposite someone. So yeah, I do like it as an exercise. As far as tendons goes, yeah, a lot of people will do some heel raises, or maybe just standing on tiptoe, and then they kind of stop and go straight back to running. So in other words, they've kind of gone up the ladder, hopefully quite sensibly, but then they've got to the middle of the ladder and then they've gone straight back to running. So they've forgotten about gently closing that gap with maybe some rungs of 2 feet jumping, maybe just some hopping, expanding the distance of the hop, and then doing some skipping, and then some more violent kind of skipping, and then going back to running. So it's all about working the way up the rungs. That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Amazing. Yeah, so I just have a look. I don't think we've had any questions. If you do have any questions, drop them in the comments below, and we'll have a chat. It was really interesting you saying about kind of the element of play during training. I mean, that's something I've noticed. The last couple of weeks I've done virtual races, or I did a virtual Tough Mudder, and just being able to go out and play as opposed to train has had a more positive impact on my general running, as opposed to knowing I've got to go out and hit a certain interval. So it's definitely something that you notice. So we've got one question. Is there any difference between ballistics? This is the downside of going horizontal, isn't it? Between ballistics and plyometrics. I tend to think of them as a difference in intensity / demand, but I'm not sure. So yeah, the difference between ballistics and plyometrics.
Ballistic, as far as I recall, is more to do with increasing range of movement. It's a method of stretching. That initially, that's what it was. Back from martial arts days, I remember ballistic stretching is, for example, where you're kind of lowering yourself down to splits, if that's what you're trying to achieve, and then kind of moving in and out of range quite quickly. It's the research is debatable, but it's used as a form of dynamic stretching, taking yourself to endpoint. It can be a little bit dangerous if you do it correctly, but plyometric exercise is more about decreasing the time between, for example, landing when your tendons stretch and then exploding and making them short again. Because that's what running is all about. It's all about when you land, if you imagine you've landed and then your body weight starts moving across your foot, at that stage your calf and your Achilles are lengthening. Okay, not by a lot, but they're getting longer as you're moving over. And during that stage, they're actually converting the energy they're taking from the impact of landing, they're absorbing that and changing it ready for the propulsive stage, where they shorten again when you come off behind you at toe off. And that's the secret basically of running. Often I compare it to a spring analogy, where you're landing on a spring like a pogo stick. As you land, then you're absorbing that ground force, and then you move forwards, and then you use that ground force to spring forwards. And that's the secret of running further. That's the idea behind plyometric exercise, helping runners become more economical and travel further through the air.
Yeah, that was from Links to Injury Emma, who I've recently connected with over Instagram. She said, thank you. She's always known it as dynamic.
We like Emma. Emma's just done a great 5K run. Thank you, Emma. Just say thank you for doing that in fancy dress. We're raising money for World Health Organization, and I think Emma did it yesterday. So it was great. Thank you, Emma. Amazing.
Yeah, I saw your post on it. It looked really good. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and it was good fun. Like we say, going back to that playing element of training certainly makes a difference. Yeah, I think that pretty much kind of sums up all the questions from me. Is there anything else you wanted to say, talk about, or ask?
No, I mean, probably I'll save those questions when I get you on my podcast. I think I found you very interesting, and the information you're putting out there on your YouTube channel. There's a can I say young without sounding patronizing or condescending? I don't know how old you are, but there's a youthfulness there. You can have youthfulness as an older person as well. And there seems to be a spark of wanting to learn and share and help. And I saw that straight away, and it's admirable. So I'm happy that you asked me to come on this show. And at a later stage, hopefully maybe in June or July, I'll grab you on Runchatlive and talk to you about where you've come from and how you got into all of this, if that sounds good.
Yeah, definitely. Always up for that. It's I love being able to learn. I'm coming up 30 in a couple of years' time. But really? That usefulness comes from, I've always worked as a teacher with younger children, so right. I will never grow up. That's where my youth all mask comes from. I will never forget. But yeah, I love learning. I love finding the research, and every now and then my coach will send me bits that I'll read. I think that's where a lot of it comes from. But yeah, definitely love to come and jump on, have a chat, and be able to find out a bit more.
Do you get sick of people thinking you're younger then? Do you get ID'd at supermarkets?
No, not that much. Depends on how tired I look, really. Depends on if I've rocked up to the shops kind of through the day or final thing after work, and then they just automatically say, no, yep, you're definitely over 21. Oh, great, okay. But yeah, so it's been brilliant speaking to you and chatting and getting a bit of insight. Also a couple of things kind of I can do a bit of research on and look into. And it's been lovely kind of seeing all the people who have jumped on and watched as well. So yeah, anyone who's come from my side, do go and say hello and go and check out Runchatlive. He's done some brilliant videos on his YouTube channel, but also some really good live streams, which I've enjoyed watching. Hopefully we'll see a few more from you, and I'll jump in on them throughout the week.
That'd be great, yeah. Hopefully we'll keep them up. Hey, Dave as well. I'm seeing a few names in here. It's tricky for me. I'm hurting my neck already. But yeah, Emma and Dave Wilson. So yeah, we've got a few people here. That's great. It'd be nice to get a crossover. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so it's been really good. I think I might just wrap it up there unless there's anything else you want to talk about.
Not really. Only one thing, just a push for raising money at the moment for, like I say, the COVID-19 support fund for World Health Organization. I've still got a link on my post on Facebook, so if anyone's desperate to get rid of a five or something, it would be great to kind of reach the £100 target. Some people have been great and generous already, so thank you to people who have donated. But if you are sick at home itching, thinking, oh, I'd like to put some money in helping save the world from this terrible virus, then there's a £5. You can spend that gladly. Just go to my Facebook. I'll collect it all together and then I will send it all over to the WHO. So yeah, that would be nice if people could do that.
Perfect. Amazing. Right, well, hopefully it all goes well with the fundraising and all your other adventures, and I look forward to seeing you in a future live stream.
Fantastic. Okay,
right.
then,
Thanks very much for today.
Thanks, people.
See you later.